The United States government just announced they're going to be implementing reverse price controls. You heard right. In fact, Scott Bessent just came out and said this could impact many industries.
We're going to set price floors and the forward buying to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And we're going to do it across a range of industries.
I'm going to reveal how reverse price controls actually work, their rationale for doing it, the unintended consequences, and how this will likely impact you in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, WTF. I'm sure is what most of you are thinking right now. You're saying, George, okay, I understand what a price control is. That's when the government makes it illegal to raise the price on something. But this, I've never even heard of that. Don't worry about it. We're going to go over it right now. Let's start with the chart going from today's date all the way back to May 2022. On the left, we go from 60 up to 110. This is a price chart of oil. Now, to be very, very clear, the government hasn't yet said that they're going to be implementing reverse price controls on oil, but it wouldn't surprise me. And we're going to go over the specific industries they're talking about in step number 2. And then in step number 3, we'll go over some unintended consequences and how this will likely impact you. All right, so starting May 22, the price of oil way up here around 110, and then it goes down all the way till we get to May of 2023. We'll call it $70, but then it trends down to a point where we are today. I checked, it was under $60 at the time we're filming this video. So let's assume for a moment the production cost in the United States for that barrel of oil is $65. Now this isn't it exactly, I'm just using this for the sake of the example. So the production cost for a barrel of oil for US producers, let's assume, $65 represented by this red dashed line. Okay, got it. But let's think about this. If the price of oil is trading under $65 a barrel, those US producers have a problem, don't they? You see, they can't compete with oil at that level because they're losing money on every single sale. So if this continues for a long period of time, basically they all go bust. Well, this is a big problem for the United States, and you guys know that oil is an input for almost every single thing we use. So the argument here is, well, whoa, wait a minute, George. Oil is so important to the US economy that we have to be self-sufficient. And the US producers cannot compete if foreigners are selling it a lot cheaper. So what happens in that scenario is that XYZ country, just fill in the blank, whether it's China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, whatever, they control the supply of something that the US needs desperately. And because the price is so low, the US producers can't compete, they go bust, which again gives the control to a foreign country that could be a foe. And this becomes a national security risk. So then what happens is your drunk insolvent Uncle Sam comes in here, and we know that he always makes great decisions, that's for sure. And he says, look, prices are too low. It's the opposite of the 1970s when the government said that prices are too high. Now they're too low. So he's going to come in and set an arbitrary line, let's just say it's at $100 a barrel for oil, where it's illegal to, I guess, buy, I'm not sure how they implement this, but it's illegal to buy or sell oil at less than $100 a barrel. So you see what he's doing is he's giving basically a subsidy to the US producers because they can now get back in the business of producing, because instead of selling oil at $65 or less than $65 a barrel, they're selling it at $100 a barrel, and they're able to pocket that spread. They're extremely profitable, and therefore we become self-sufficient. So this is what reverse price controls are. This is their rationale for doing it. So now let's go into the specific industry the central planners are going to target because prices are just way, way, way too low.
Step number 2. So now let's go right over to CNBC and go over the details. Headline: Trump administration will set price controls across range of industries to combat China. Now, what he was talking about specifically the other day was rare earths. So this mineral that we need for a lot of different inputs for the stuff we manufacture, and a lot of the defense, to be fair, a lot of the defense stuff that we manufacture here in the United States. So he's saying that to start with rare earths, we're going to utilize price controls or reverse price controls. Then he says this is to combat market manipulation by China. And he's being very clever with words here. And what I want to do is be as literal as possible so you guys know exactly what's happening. Now, it doesn't mean that you can agree with it, you disagree with it, whatever. I'll leave that up to you to decide, but you have to know what's going on. And they like to use this clever terminology to try to mask what's happening beneath the surface. So let's use more correct terminology. It's not that you're combating market manipulation by China, you're combating low prices from China. And whether those low prices are a result of slave labor or, let's say, a lack of environmental regulation or government subsidies, that's the bottom line. They're not manipulating the market, they're just charging a lot lower price. He then says, when you're facing a non-market economy like China, then you have to exercise industrial policy. Again, being clever with words. Let's reframe that in a way that's far more literal and to the point. When you're facing a non-market economy like China, then you have to use non-market policies. Or the way I would say it, I think is even better, is when you're facing a centrally planned economy like China, you have to use central planning. That would be the most specific way to describe what's going on here. But of course, he's not going to do that because when you use the term central planning with Americans, they're like, whoa, wait a minute here. No. We're all about capitalism. We're all about free market capitalism. So how can we be capitalists if we're central planners? All the bad guys, they're central planners. So you see, we can't use the literal term. We have to use industrial policy. Then he says they're going to use price controls to make sure this doesn't happen again. And we're going to do it in a range of industries. So right now, it might be about rare earths. But if the argument is this is a national security risk because this is a very important input to a lot of the things we need, well, you could use that argument for a lot of things, like oil that we talked about, step number 1. How about copper? How about nickel? How about uranium? How about a lot of these things? How about natural gas right now with AI booming and the need for cheap power? So my point here is if you agree with this policy or if you're pursuing this policy in terms of the government, then you also, using that exact same rationale, have to pursue the exact same policy in all these other industries that are just as vital to the United States economy. So then you get into this position where we are quite literally like China in the form of central planning and the government setting prices for pretty much everything that's an important input to our overall economy. And he concludes by saying the Trump administration will not take stakes in non-strategic industries. I think it's ironic here that he also says we do have to be very careful not to overreach. Really? You mean there's a risk for central planning? You mean there's a risk to giving the government all this power and all this control? There's a risk to giving the government the ability to pick winners and losers? And by the way, just as a reminder of how good or bad the government is at this and how absolutely arbitrary it can be, let's go right back to the cerveza sickness. Remember, back then, the government was telling you who is essential and who is non-essential. And if you support these policies, that's fine. I get it, national security risk. But you also have to support the government getting involved in setting prices and becoming equity holders, let's say, in industries such as oil, nat gas, copper, etc. So you can see how this can put us on a very, very slippery slope. And it's something that Besant actually admits when he says we do have to be very careful not to overreach. The problem here, of course, is who gets to determine whether or not we've overreached.
Step number 3. So now let's go over the end game, where this inevitably leads and how it will likely impact you, the viewers. Let's start with a chart going all the way back to 1900, but editor, go ahead and throw up the original. This chart goes way back to the 1700s, and it doesn't go to today's date. It goes to 2018. But I know, I've done the math, and I know what has happened since then, and I'll go ahead and fill you in. On the left, we go from 10% up to 50%. What is this chart? This is a chart of total government spending, including state and local, as a percentage of GDP. And you guys can see which way it's gone. And as you know, during the cerveza sickness, and where we are now running these massive deficits and huge government spending, even with Doge and everything else the administration is trying to do to actually cut spending, going the opposite direction, I can almost assure you that this red line would now be way up here, probably very close to 50%. In other words, government spending is about 1/2 of the US economy right now. So you got to ask yourself, well, how efficient is government spending? The answer, not very efficient. We all know that. That's something we can all agree on for sure. But this government spending as a percentage of the economy is basically, the way I look at it, it is spending, but it's also control. So I just look at this chart as a proxy for how much control the government has. Now, it might be economic control, but I would ask you viewers who are a little bit older, can we also use this chart for control over your life? So do you think we had more freedom back in the 1960s and 1950s or less personal freedom than we have right now? I think we, again, can all agree that we have a lot less personal freedom and liberty today than we had, let's just say, 75 years ago. So I think it's very fair to say that this chart is really a proxy for overall control of not just the economy, but of our lives. And if the government continues with price controls, taking equity positions in companies, and believe they've got great reasons for it. I know I'm going to get a lot of comments on this video saying, George, you don't understand. They have to do this because China's big, bad, they're the boogeyman. And if we don't do this, then we're all going to be speaking Chinese in 10 years, or they're going to invade Taiwan, or just fill in the blank, whatever scary thing that's going to happen. But let's look at this chart and think this through. Well, every single time we had a big jump up in government control, there was a great reason. There's always a good reason. What? World War I. Well, that's a good reason. The Great Depression, good reason. World War II, good reason. And look at all the guns and butter, Vietnam. We have the Cold War that we have to fight. That's a fantastic reason as it goes up, 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 up. GFC, another great reason. Cerveza sickness. What are you going to do? We got to give the government more control. And now, rare earths. This is a national security risk. So there's only one thing we can do, and that's give the government more control. So what you're left with is this inevitability that the government just grows and grows and grows. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. Well, each one of those cuts, like we said, you could easily rationalize why you've got to just make one more cut. But sooner or later, there's going to be too many cuts, and the person that's cutting themselves or getting the cuts, they're going to do what? They're unfortunately going to die. And it's the exact same thing with the US economy. A lot of this stuff is completely self-inflicted. So let's go back to what we talked about in step number 2, where if you're going to use this argument for rare earths, and I'm not saying it isn't a valid argument, I totally get it. national security interest. We have to do this. If we don't, China is the big bad boogeyman, and they're at one point in time going to have way too much leverage over our economy and over our countries, and we can't let that happen. I get it. But if you're going to make that argument for rare earths, you've got to make that argument for oil. You've got to make that argument for copper. You've got to make that argument also for AI. So what happens if China comes out with something, I don't know, like DeepSeek, and that brings the cost down to almost free? Well, we've got NVIDIA, we've got OpenAI, we've got Intel, we have AMD, we have all of these companies that are extremely important, and we as the United States, the bastion of freedom, and ironically free market capitalism, in the entire world, we have to make sure that we control AI. And if the Chinese come in with DeepSeek and provide that AI for basically free, we can't compete with that. Then they control the supply of AI, and then we're completely doomed. So every single AI company, well, we've got to do reverse price controls for them too. So right now, you might be getting AI for free, but in the future, absolutely not. The minimum you can pay for AI by law is going to be $1,000 per month, because that's what OpenAI needs for all these trillions and trillions of dollars that they spend every single year on CapEx. So there's all of these fantastic justifications, but unfortunately, whether there's a good reason or a bad reason or no reason at all, you end up in the exact same place. And that's with the government having 100% of the control, and you waking up saying, how on earth did that happen? But now let's take it right back to the economics as to how this is going to impact your purchasing power, your wallet, your standard of living, your ability to put a roof over your head or food on the table. Well, you can see where this is going. I mean, if the government is making it illegal to charge a lower price for things that are these vital inputs to almost every single thing that we buy, today it's rare earths, tomorrow it's copper, the next day it's oil and natural gas, well then what on earth is going to happen to all the other prices, the consumer goods, that use these as inputs? Well, that means you are going to be paying the price to make sure the economy is self-sufficient and we aren't reliant on any of these foreign boogeymen that we should be very, very worried about because they're lurking beneath the bed, just waiting to jump out and grab us and take control of our whole country to make sure that we're all speaking Chinese. So bottom line here is prices most likely go higher and higher and higher and higher. But unfortunately, what's going to happen to your paycheck? Well, we've seen how this plays out. It's the cerveza sickness. It's 2020, 2021, 2022. When prices are going like this, but your paycheck is going like that. And it wasn't just the cerveza sickness. You can go right back to the 1940s, right here, and it's the exact same thing. And what did they implement? They didn't implement reverse price controls. They implemented price controls just like the 1970s. Bigger and bigger and bigger government, more central planning, more control over the overall economy. Oh, but wait, no need to worry because the government has a solution for this. Of course they do. If prices are going higher and higher and higher, and this is squeezing the consumer because of their reverse price controls, what they can do is they can just implement price controls. So over here, we're going to make it illegal to buy at a lower price, but then over here, we're going to make it illegal to raise your prices. Well, there you go. Easy peasy. Now, I know this sounds like a joke, and I am being lighthearted intentionally, but let's be honest for a moment. Would you really put that past the government? I don't think so. And I know a lot of you right about now are just saying, okay, George, we're just criticizing everything. But you doomers and you libertarians, you guys never have any solutions. So until you come up with some solutions, that are viable, then I'm not going to listen to you, and I'm just going to vote for more central planning and bigger government because it's a national security risk. Aha! But I'm one step ahead of you, and this is the key. My solution is, instead of trying to combat China, which is more central planning so we can be like them, we should lean on what's made us such a great country to begin with, and that is free market capitalism. Let me show you what I mean. Editor, go ahead and throw up a map of global deposits of rare earths. And what we can see is rare earths aren't so rare. In fact, there's just as many of these deposits in the United States or Australia or another friendly country as they have in China. So why on earth are we so dependent on them? Well, number one, it's refining. And number two, what it really boils down to at the end of the day is regulation. It goes back to NIMBY, not in our backyard. You see, we want to delegate all the dirty, polluting, environmentally unfriendly things to those bad guys over there in China. And then we want to live in this pristine fantasy world where we're not polluting the earth. No, no, no. It's those yellow people over there and their communism and their central planning and their market manipulation. We're just simply taking the rare earths and using them to build weapons for our self-defense. It's all about national security, right? So the point is, we could produce all of this stuff ourselves, and we could do it without the insanity of reverse price controls. But what we would have to do is lower regulations so we could produce this stuff at a competitive price, even when you factor in wage difference, because you've got transport costs. So it's something we very easily could do, but there's a cost-benefit analysis. We could produce it very inexpensively by ourselves, but we're going to be polluting the environment. So which one do you choose? So what we've done is said, okay, we don't want to pollute the environment, so we're going to produce this stuff, but we're going to produce it at an astronomical price, and therefore you, the average Joe and Jane, are inevitably going to have to pay the price. So the real solution isn't less free market capitalism and more government control. It's less government control and more free market capitalism. Now, I know a lot of you right about now are probably looking at this and saying, okay, George, I get it, but this is just another thing I've got to worry about. I mean, we've got the AI bubble. We've got the housing bubble. We have every single financial bubble imaginable. How do I, first and foremost, protect or maybe even grow my wealth? And then I can also worry about increasing my personal liberty and freedom. Well, fortunately, guys, I've got something for you. Editor, cut to the clip.
October 29th, I'm going to be doing a free webinar training where I'm going to show you step by step the contrarian strategies the pros use to invest during financial bubbles and how they take potential crisis and turn it into opportunity. I'm also going to reveal why the typical approach investors take, which is just buy and hold, buy the dip, or just buy a passive S&P index fund, is the opposite of what you actually want to do, and how that might have worked in the past, but it likely will not work moving forward. Oh, but wait, there is more. The best part about this webinar training is that I'm going to be giving every single person who attends a free bonus. That's right. This bonus is a $500 coupon code for Rebel Capitalist Live. This is the conference, the investment conference I do every single year. It's in Orlando, 2026, end of May. It's going to be absolutely epic. This is an event you don't want to miss. And just by attending that webinar, you're going to get a coupon code that takes the price of a ticket from $599 all the way down to $99. So if you'd like the cheat code the pros use to invest in financial bubbles, and you'd like this incredible free bonus for Rebel Capitalist Live, you can go ahead and click the link in the description below, and I will see you October 29th.